and make a copy of the document like you normally would, and then we're going to go from there. So your copy of the document will look like this. And then when you click on that Gizmo login link and pull up, you should see the Coral Reefs 1 Abiotic Factors, and you're going to launch that Gizmo. You'll see something that looks like this. So what we are going to do, you guys are going to work through the prior knowledge questions. It's just based on this graph. Real simple, what's it looking like it shows, and then just give an idea of what you think might be causing that change in the coral cover. Okay. Then the Gizmo warm-up. This is to kind of get you situated with how the Gizmo works. There are a lot of little tabs, and you are essentially just going to be changing some data and making observations and recording information. So what you're going to do, this coral reef gives you a bunch of different corals, algae, different types of fish, and other ocean animals that we're going to focus on in the Caribbean reefs. Okay, so what you're going to do at the bottom here, it says advanced year, and then it has year 0. You're going to click on this 10 times. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And we're just kind of watching and making observations. Everything in this Gizmo right now is considered to be a balanced coral reef. Everything is functioning properly, working together. So there's really no change. Okay, so you'll answer that question. And then what you're going to do is select the data tab. So if you go to the top here, it says data, and you'll click on that. And you can see it has a graph. There are certain species selected and some not. So you should have these 4 species selected, and they have their 4 lines. And as you can see, they pretty much stay the same. There is an increase a little bit in the sponges, but otherwise, these populations are pretty stable and they're staying the same. So you answer that question as well. Then it wants you to go to the summary tab, which is on the side over here. So there's conditions and then summary. You're going to click on that summary, and it tells you what those reef conditions are and explains that it's healthy, there's no disease, there's no bleaching, there's a high fish diversity, and the coral cover is high. So what you're going to do, you're going to look at the nutrient load, the water clarity, the coral cover, and total fish species in this reef conditions, and just put in what the numbers would be. So for nutrient load, it says 4 ppt. That's what you would type in to your box. Then we're ready to begin activity A. There are 3 activities in this Gizmo. So you guys are going to be working on this today and tomorrow. But I want to walk you through the basics. So what you'll do, you'll click back on the conditions tab. You're going to click return to original settings, and you're also going to need to click back on the coral reef tab. So it kind of resets everything, and then also click restart where the years are. So everything should be back at 0. You should kind of be back where the Gizmo started. What you're going to look at first is looking at how these different species interact with each other. So it has the picture of what they look like, so you can identify them as they're floating around. And then I also provided the names for you already. So all you have to do is provide what it eats or how it obtains its energy. So if you look, I'm going to click on this really big fish right now. This is the grouper. He's going to keep on swimming, but as you can see, his information popped up. So it's a large predatory fish that feeds on many reef fish, including snappers, angelfish, and parrotfish. So I would put in many reef fish, and I would just say including those snappers, angelfish, and parrotfish. Okay, so you just need to type in what it eats or how it obtains its energy. So for the corals, that's one thing. If you click on one of those corals, the staghorn coral, it says it obtains energy from photosynthetic symbiotic algae. That's what you're going to put, okay? That's all you need to do for that. It'll just be like a sentence or a little statement, but you're going to do that for all the animals listed. Then question 2 talks about zooanthely, which is a food that lives inside the coral's tissues, and you're going to just answer some questions based on what you think might happen. Okay? Then going to 3, a producer is an organism that makes its own energy. So this is going to be something that's like a plant. Okay? And then a consumer is something that eats other organisms to obtain energy. So you answer those questions. If you need to, you can always look back at your chart here to see what makes or obtains its energy from like sunlight or through photosynthesis, and then what are organisms that eat something else. So you answer that, and then same thing with question C. You'll go through, read what filter feeders are, grazers, and then predators. Based on that chart, it will help you answer those questions. Then the next thing is to create a food chain. I gave you an example here already, but a food chain just represents how organisms obtain their energy and food. Starting with a producer, so one of those plants generally, and then moving on to consumers. So you are going to create a second food chain. You can also look at this food web, which shows how the animals are all connected. I filled this out for you as well, but you're going to type that in. And then you guys are ready to move on to activity B. You're going to make sure that ocean conditions on this conditions tab is selected. You should be at the coral reef. Everything should be restarted and returned to original settings. And then you are going to work through how these changing ocean conditions might affect the coral reef and the animals. So as you read through the directions, you're going to look at how coral reefs might be affected by storms, high temperature, and acidic water. So the first thing you're going to do is make some predictions, and then you're going to make some observations by changing the storm severity and looking at the data table as you go through what happens to the organisms. Then what you'll do is kind of reset and make some predictions about what happens if you change the temperature. So then you'll reset your year and return to original settings, and then change the temperature and collect data. And then you'll click on the data tab again, look at that graph, and go from there. Then you'll do the same thing with the pH. So after you collect your data for temperature, you'll return to original settings, restart, and then change the ocean pH level and answer those questions. Then when you get to activity C, you're going to switch to the conditions tab and switch to land use. Excuse me. So as you work through activity C, it's going to be the same process. You're changing some things around, and you're looking at different how different changes affect the coral reefs. So the first thing here, you're going to click on summary, and you'll collect the data for the reef conditions for sediment load, nutrient load, and water clarity. Then you'll make some predictions. Then you'll go back to the conditions tab and change the logging, and then click on summary and see what differences there are. Then you'll work through and make some observations on the coral reef tab, and then you'll click through the data tab and collect some data and answer those questions. And then you'll work through and you'll click restart again and change your next example. So you'll move logging back down to 0 and then change sewage. And again, click on the summary tab and look at the sediment load, nutrient load, and water clarity. Make some predictions, make some observations. Then you're going to click on the data table and look at what it affects there as well. And then with question 10, you'll click restart again, and then you are changing to disease. So at conditions, you'll go to disease and kind of see what happens with that, okay? The other thing you're going to have to do once you click back on the disease and you're going to look at the sea urchin infection rate to 100%, you have to click and go back to land use and also make sure that sewage goes back to 50%. Okay, and then you'll answer those questions. And that's the end of the gizmo then. So what you'll do, again, you're going to work through this today. I would suggest trying to get through the initial part and then activity A, and maybe trying to work through activity B, but definitely get through A today. And then tomorrow you can always finish it up and complete it and turn it in. It isn't due until tomorrow, so you have time to get this done. This is what we're working on the next 2 days. But if you have any questions along the way, please email me. I would suggest you make a copy of this right away and then make sure you have the link open for the gizmo that you can just keep logging into. In the event that Schoology does crash again, you can still work on this because it's outside of Schoology. Again, if you have any questions, please email me. Otherwise, have a good Thursday.